Okay, it looks like the logging in has slowed down, so we will go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. My name is Kim Brown. I am with the Rural Institute Transition and Employment Projects, and I will be your moderator for today. Today's webinar is sponsored by the University of Montana Rural Institute Transition and Employment Projects, and is funded in whole or in part under a contract with the Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services. The statements shared in today's presentation do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the department. All of the audience members are currently muted. That helps to cut down on background noise so that everybody can hear the presenters. If you would like to ask one of the presenters a question or make a comment, please type your question or comment into the chat box. If you don't see the chat box on your screen, you should look up to the upper right-hand side of your screen, and there will be a box with an arrow in it. If you click on that, it will open a menu, and on that menu you should find the chat box. We will have several question and answer periods during today's session, and we will have a question and answer period at the end of the session as well. For those of you who requested Montana Office of Public Instruction renewal units when you registered, we will email those to you after the webinar. It generally takes a couple of weeks, and you do have to be pre-registered to receive the OPI credit. Please note that we're currently unable to issue other kinds of attendance documentation. Today's session is being audio taped for the Rural Institute Transition and Employment Projects Resource Library, and I'll post that address in the chat box in just a few minutes. The slides for today's webinar are already posted on the Transition and Employment Project site, so if you'd like to go and download those slides, you're welcome to do that. We do encourage you to visit the webinar archives on our website. Over the years, we've provided sessions on a variety of transition-related topics, including customized employment, transportation, healthcare transition, assistive technology, and lots of other subjects that you might find helpful. There will be a short survey at the end of the webinar. It should pop up automatically when you exit the webinar. We do hope that you will take the time to answer. I think there are only 8 questions. We read through all of the survey results that we receive, and we really do take them into account as we look at what kinds of topics we should address in webinars in the future, and also when we're trying to figure out how we can make these webinars more user-friendly and more useful to you. So again, please do take the time to complete the survey when that pops up. We're very lucky today to have 3 great speakers with us and a couple of guest speakers who will be joining us as well. Martin Blair, McLean, Burnham, and Natalias Story will be our main presenters today, and I'll give you a brief biography of each presenter before they begin their presentation. So thank you to everyone, both presenters and audience, for joining us today, and with that, we'll go ahead and get started with our topic, what's the buzz about inclusion? Some of the questions that we will be exploring today with our different presenters include, what does inclusion mean? And what does inclusion not mean? What does inclusion look like? And why is it important? Why are we hearing all this talk about inclusion in schools, in communities, in employment? Why does it matter? And then lastly, how can we make inclusion happen? And so as you're listening to our presenters today, keep these questions in mind and see if you might come up with some answers based on what you hear. There are a variety of different definitions out there for inclusion. I just selected a couple to share with you today. The first one comes from Kathy Snow, who has a website, Disability is Natural, and lots of great information on that site. And she writes that an inclusive environment is one that replicates the natural proportion. Inclusion means all people in all environments all of the time. The Kids Together website also has some definitions of inclusion and also a variety of different materials related to inclusion and how to make it happen. And they say inclusion is being a part of what everyone else is, being welcomed and embraced as a member who belongs. And the final definition that I included on here moves further into that idea of belonging, that inclusion is a sense of belonging, feeling respected and valued for who you are, feeling a level of supportive energy and commitment from others so that you can do your best. So to continue a little bit further with that idea of belonging, Dale DeLeo in his book wrote, in one of his books, wrote that I think one of the core qualities desired by the people with disabilities I have known is social belonging, By that I mean being a part of things, including something meaningful to do and a good home, in a place where they can have fun with their friends and family. And really, isn't that what everybody wants? Isn't that what all of us are looking for, is this sense of belonging? So when we talk about inclusion and we think about it being belonging as part of the definition, then I guess that suggests that we be cautious about what we support as inclusive activities. Do they really promote a sense of belonging, or do they promote a sense of tokenism instead? And just because we have physical inclusion doesn't mean that we have social inclusion. So we may have people with and without disabilities together in the same environment, but if they aren't interacting, if they aren't having relationships, then we don't really have inclusion under the definition that I propose and that we're using here today, and we don't really have a sense of belonging. And why are relationships important? In part because they create resilience. Relationships help us get through tough times and tough situations. And so relationships are important to everybody, and that's part of what inclusion can bring. I have some different examples here of situations that I'd like you to think about in terms of whether you think these are inclusive or not. And at the end of today's presentations, if we have time, we'll do a quick poll using these same examples and see what folks think. If, after listening to all of our presenters today, you think that these examples are inclusive or are not inclusive. And in case you're not able to see the slide, I'll just read through them quickly so you can keep them in the backs of your minds as you're listening to the other presenters. The first example: students with disabilities attend their neighborhood school, but they stay in separate classrooms all day. The second example: a local service club membership includes a number of individuals with disabilities who participate alongside people without disabilities. The next example: a basketball team for youth with disabilities. And the next example: a basketball team for all middle school students. Next one is play at a community theater where the actors and actresses are people with and without disabilities. And the final example is a dance for teens with disabilities at a local youth center. So keep those in mind as we listen to the presenters today, and if we have time at the end of the session, we'll return to those and see what you think, whether they are inclusive or not. With that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our first speaker for today, Dr. Martin Blair. Dr. Blair began his career as a special education teacher. After several years in the classroom, he worked as a trainer, evaluator, and administrator at the Utah State University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, the Center for Persons with Disabilities. In 2013, Dr. Blair assumed leadership of the University of Montana Rural Institute for Inclusive Communities, Montana's University Center for Excellence. Dr. Blair has presented over 50 papers to national and international audiences and authored dozens of professional articles. Topics range from assistive technology to education policy to cultural diversity. His professional work focuses on improving the quality of life for individuals with disabilities and their families. He works with students, faculty and staff, state and federal legislators and administration officials, and those who are the primary beneficiaries of the services and supports. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Blair.
Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. It's nice to be with you. I appreciate the opportunity to be with McLean and Natalia and others with you on this webinar. As Kim said, I'm Marty Blair, and I started my career over 25 years ago as a special education teacher, and that was at a time when we were talking about inclusion, but we really didn't know exactly what it meant. And I've spent my professional career, and even before that, with friends and family and neighbors over the years trying to figure out what it really means to be fully included. You'll notice that the name of our organization is the Rural Institute for Inclusive Communities. It's something that we're for. It's something that we advocate for and we work towards, and we conduct research and training and services, all with the idea of helping people to be more included and involved in the communities of their choice. In fact, just this week and today, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, I'm attending meetings with my colleagues from different parts of the country, and we're talking about different types of technology and how technology can help us be more independent, how technology in a way can in some ways erase or eliminate the differences between us and help us to communicate clearly with each other, so that disability is set aside, but we can be fully included and discuss fully with each other the issues of our day. So I'm really grateful to be with you today. As we have this discussion, I would like to go back to where this whole idea of inclusion comes from. I think we all know that we have a desire to be included, not just physically, but socially as well, and look at the history of our nation's goals with respect to inclusion. If you go to the next slide, please. If we consider the laws that are put in place that protect and support the rights of people with disabilities, the rights of people who are disadvantaged, there are four main pillars, four consistent foundations for each of those laws. First is that our nation's laws, and in the law they refer to them as our nation's proper goals. I don't know why they use that terminology, but they do. Those four goals start with, first, assuring an equality of opportunity. That you and I and each of us should, by our government, be assured an equality of opportunity, whether that be at work or at school or in recreation in our communities. That doesn't mean everything has to be exactly equal for us, but we should all have the same opportunities to be able to make the choices that we want to make. Added to that, secondly, is full participation. We all have a right to fully participate in the communities of our choice, whether that be on a swim team or our religious communities or our work communities or whatever it might be. You and I each have a right to fully participate in those activities, not just to be there physically, but to be there in our activities, in our thoughts, in our discussion, and being able to fully make decisions with regard to what we do. The third foundation is independent living. You and I each have a right to live as independently as we desire to live. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't need help. All of us need help. In fact, I like to use the word interdependent rather than independent, because each of us relies on other people to help us get through life. I mean, that's just the way it goes. But this third area, independent living, refers to how we live, where we live, and the choices that we are able to make about where we live and how we live. We have a right to live independently, or interdependently if you go that far. And fourth, we have a right to economic self-sufficiency. That refers to our ability to work, to have a job, to be able to be with friends and earn a living and socialize in a workplace. We each have a right to those four areas. So with that, I just want to set that stage. Let's talk about very, very briefly where this idea of inclusion has come from a policy perspective, where it's come from with respect to our laws and the policies that we are subject to now in the United States. If you go to the next slide, please. This whole notion of being fully included has been around for many, many years, actually for over a century and a half, nearly 2 centuries, but it wasn't until the 1960s that the disability community in particular began to take a stronger role in public policy, a stronger role in advocating for being fully included in the communities of our choice. If you think about what was going on in the United States 50 years ago, there was a lot of civil rights discussion that was based on racial equality. It was also based on women's rights as we moved into the 70s. And those with disabilities also decided to be a part of this civil rights movement. It wasn't just about the color of your skin, but it's about how you hear and how you see and how you move through your community. There are civil rights for all of us. So if we look back 40 or 50 years ago in the 1960s and 70s, that's when we started to look at access. How do we include people? Well, inclusion in those days meant just being able to get on the sidewalk, or just being able to get on the bus, or just being able to attend the same school. There was a time not many years ago when inclusion meant that students with disabilities could attend their neighborhood school. Well, as time has gone on and as we've learned, We've gotten past that. In the 70s and the 80s and moving into the 90s with the advent of technologies, we've seen that people with disabilities have a full right to be not only in the same location, but to fully participate in the activities and programs that everyone else participates in. So as we move into the 90s and the 2000s and now into this decade and beyond, we have to be thinking about what's next. I have a friend and colleague who has said, you know, there was a time when we worried about physical access, but we need to be talking about what is beyond access. What do we mean by inclusion, and how do we design our environments and our programs and activities so that people are not just in the same room with us, but that we can have ongoing dialogue, so that we can participate with each other, so that we can learn from each other, so that we can actually have equality of opportunity and fully participate as our nation's proper goals describe. If you go to the next slide, please. So, if we think about this concept of inclusion, well, certainly it's about access. It's about being able to physically get somewhere. But it's also about being there. And when I mean being there, it's not just physically there, but being mentally there and emotionally there and emotionally participating. Which, you put all that together, it's about participation. And that's what I want to talk about for the next few minutes, is that inclusion, in my mind, and the work that I've done and my colleagues are doing, and I think what we'll be hearing about for the next hour and a half or so, is about how people are not just included, but how they are participating, and how their participation makes them fully included. So if you would please go to the next slide. I thought this was kind of a funny picture. I hope most of you have a chance to see this. If you can't, then I will try to describe it to you. Those of you that are in Montana, you know that there's a big rivalry between the University of Montana and Montana State University. I was actually on a visit to the other university, Montana State University, and I saw this and took a picture. I thought it was kind of funny in a way, but sad in a way as well. You can see in this picture that there is an accessible parking space, that it is well marked, and that the space, according to the law, is right where it needs to be. But in the space that's just to the right of it, which is a place where you would put a ramp, for example, if you had a wheelchair or if you had trouble getting in and out of your car, there's supposed to be an open space there that's supposed to be at least 5 to 6 feet or 8 feet wide, so you can get in and out of your car from the side. Well, the facilities folks have put a big garbage can right in the way. So even if you're able to park in that parking spot, it might be difficult to get out on the side because there's a big trash can there. But there's even more. An accessible parking space is supposed to be close to a sidewalk that you can get onto. And if you look at this picture, there is not what we call a curb cut. A curb cut is that cut in a curb so that you can roll a wheelchair up on to the sidewalk. Well, even if you could get onto the sidewalk in this picture, if you look about 15 feet beyond that sidewalk, you see there are stairs. This just kind of made me scratch my head that yes, this is an accessible space. We are trying to include people by giving them a place to park, but it's not enough. We have to make sure that people can get in and out of their car. We need to make sure that people can not only get in and out of their car, but they can get on the sidewalk. And once they get on the sidewalk, we have to be sure that they can get to the front door. And that, I think, is analogous to what I'm talking about today. It's more than just giving people physical access to our activities. We need to make sure that all aspects of what we are doing fully include people with disabilities, and people with all types of disabilities, not just physical disabilities, but people with all types of abilities. So it comes down to, and if you turn to the next slide, please, it comes down to shared experiences. I have a few photos here of people that are involved in outdoor recreation, involved in education, in different settings. I think you and I, each of us, not only do we want to be able to enter a room or be involved, be included in a place, but we want to share experiences with our friends and our families. We want to have fun together. We want to work together. We want to play together. We want to go to school together and share those experiences together. In my mind, that is what full inclusion is all about. It's access plus participation, which is defined by shared experience. So what I'd like to do in the next few minutes now is share with you a few of the stories. The project that my colleagues on this webinar, the project that they're all involved in, has spent a lot of time over the past several years looking at stories of emerging leaders. These are young people in the state of Montana who are striving to be fully included in the communities of their choice. Now, some of these stories are a few years old, and some of them you may have seen because they're all listed on the website at the Rural Institute in the Transition Employment Projects site. So some of the stories have may changed. Some of these people may have moved on from some of these circumstances. But there was a time in the last several years that these stories that I'm going to tell you and share with you, that was the state of their inclusion. So if you go to the next slide, what I'd like you to do is I share these next, I think I've got 4 stories here. As I share them with you, I would like you to think about the questions that Kim posed to us at the beginning. What does it really mean to be included, and how can we learn from the experiences of these people to help us understand not only what inclusion is, but how we can be more inclusive in our own environments, and how we can, if we're someone who's not feeling fully included, what are some things we can to improve our ability to be more included with other people and other opportunities. So let's look at Devin. Devin is a young man from Frenchtown. He's graduated from high school some years back, but before he graduated from high school, he was fully included. Not immediately, though. There are some things that he did that helped him to be more engaged and involved and to more fully participate in his school. Starting with an interest in his freshman basketball team, he became the assistant basketball coach and ended up working with the JV team. He became a leader. That didn't happen overnight, and they didn't just, let him in the door and to be the assistant basketball coach. No, that's something that he had to work towards. He found ways to be involved, and I'm certain that there were times in Devin's life when he was a little bit afraid, that it was new, he was having to meet new people, but he didn't let it stop him. He said that he felt like he fit somewhere, and as he became more involved with the team, as he's been more involved with his family, as he's had opportunities given to him, he's taken them. And that, I think, is key, is that he's taken opportunities to be involved, and he's prepared himself by the decisions he's made to be more included. He has support. In fact, he has substantial support. But another key here is that he gets to decide what types of support he needs, and he gets to decide on how those supports are provided to him. Obviously, we all encounter obstacles, but how we encounter those obstacles and how we prepare ourselves to deal with them and then to move forward by the decisions we make is, I think, one strong aspect of being fully included. If you go to the next slide. Sierra is a young woman who is a member of the Consumer Advisory Council for the Rural Institute. Sierra has done some great things in her life. She is a very bright young woman. She lives in Helena. She finished a degree at the University of Montana. Now again, Sierra didn't do this all by herself. She had assistance. She was able to ask for the assistance that she needed. People just didn't do things for her. They allowed Sierra to make choices for herself. She knows the level of assistance that she needs, and so as she asks for it and she's able to live interdependently. She lives in her own home in Helena, and life isn't always perfect. You know, sometimes the assistance that she needs is available, and sometimes it's not as available. Sometimes her family has to step in more than at other times. So life isn't always perfect. But the key is that she's able to make decisions for herself about her future. That is part of being included and fully participating. Just like anyone else, we have to make decisions about where we go to school, about how we go to school, about where we live and how we live. If you would turn to the next slide, please. The last two. Alan's story. Alan is from Eureka. He became very involved with the golf team at his school. It started as a hobby, but as he worked hard, he was able to get a job at the golf course, and this became something that he did throughout his high school years. The interesting thing about Alan's story is that it prompted other ideas and other opportunities for him. Not only was he being proactive, but he showed by his determination and by his willingness to learn that he could do much more than other people thought he could do. And one of the things that it talks about in his emerging leader story is that he took an interest in cooking and maybe even wanting to be a chef. Now, I don't know where Alan is today. Who knows? He could be on this webinar today. If he is, I'd love to hear from him. But he was not only looking to be engaged and involved, but people allowed him to make choices for himself. And by so doing, his life is much more fulfilling than it otherwise would be. And he is the final story that I want to share with you. She has her own company called Lissy's Love Yums. She owns her own business. Now again, this isn't something she's done all by herself. She has asked for assistance and help just like anybody else does. We all ask for assistance and help. And things that is said clearly in her story that I think is something for us to consider is that part of being independent is knowing when to ask for help and knowing how to ask. That is part of what it means to be fully included, is knowing when to ask for help and how to do it in an appropriate way, in a kind way. So, if we can go to the next slide here. What is inclusion? To me, a strong measure of inclusion is the degree to which we make decisions for ourselves. Now, you might be thinking, well, this is about inclusion. It's not about being self-directed or consumer-directed services. Well, that's true, but I think those concepts are all very much interrelated. Think about your own life. Where do I live? What do I eat? Where do I work? What should I wear? How do I spend my time, and how do I spend my money? Those are the decisions that all people, all teenagers, those are some of the things that we learn as kids, but as we become teenagers and young adults and into adulthood, those are the kinds of decisions that we make and that hopefully people will allow us to make. And as we can make these decisions, and as other people allow us to make these decisions and honor what we decide, then we are really, I believe, promoting full inclusion. Themes that we hear often from young people and from those who support them and partner with them as they grow and grow into adulthood is that people with disabilities are often underestimated. Sometimes underestimated by their families, by their friends, by their employers. And I would sometimes people with disabilities underestimating ourselves and our own ability. Sometimes we need to just take chances. I know that may scare some people, but we take chances to decide where we want to live and what we want to do and how we spend our time. When we are making those kinds of decisions and acting in that way, we are promoting this idea of full inclusion, that it's beyond access, but it's fully participating in life like everybody else. So let me go to this last slide. I guess I would ask those of us that are here, and this is for all of us, if we are going to be fully included in life, if I can just say it that way, what decisions do we make what decisions do we want to make? We consider who can help us, and more importantly, who do we trust to help us? And that's important. There might be many people who want to help. Who do we trust to help us? And I think most importantly is what will we do to prepare ourselves to be more included? What questions do we want to ask? What are our thoughts and opinions about where we live and what we do and how we spend our free time? Do we have opinions about those things? Do we share those opinions with the people we trust? You know, the people that we trust are people who want us to be successful. So what are the ways in which we are developing trusting relationships with these folks? And how are we developing trusting and kind relationships with others? So I know this may seem more like I'm talking about self-direction, which I am, but this notion and this idea of inclusion is about participation, and I think Kim used the term belonging earlier. Every one of us wants to not just be in a room, but we want to participate with what's going on. We want to belong with the group that's in the room. And for those of us who have disabilities, what that means is we want people to give us a chance, to give us that equal opportunity. For those of us who are serving and supporting and partnering with people with disabilities, we have to at times take a step back and recognize that part of being included is being able to, yes, maybe fail, but also be successful in the decisions that we make. So I guess that's my main message today, is that inclusion in my mind is not just about place, but it's about belonging, it's about participating, and it's about being able to make the decisions that everyone else around us is making. So with that, that's how I would answer the question, what is inclusion anyway? It's much more than place. It's about belonging and being there. So if there are questions or comments, I'd love to hear them.
Excellent. Thank you, Marty. This is Kim, and we do have one question that's come in already, so I'll go ahead and read that so that the audience will be able to hear the question. In Missoula, many children with disabilities do not attend their neighborhood school, but are assigned to another MCPS based on resources available in that school. Do resources to support an individual trump inclusion, or should resources be considered after inclusion?
That is a great question. In fact, that's really a legal question. And inclusion, if I can answer this, well, I'll try and answer this as directly as I can. So if I miss the question, let me know. But students have a right to be educated in their neighborhood school, in the school that's closest to them. The resources to provide that inclusion should not be the primary deciding factor. That's a secondary, maybe even a tertiary consideration. Children have a right, as do families, have a right to have their children educated in the school that is in their neighborhood, so that young people can attend school with their friends and neighbors. That's not always the way it works, but and there are legal cases about that back and forth, but the spirit of the law, full participation, equality of opportunity, we go back to those 4 basic foundations, dictate to us that the children should be educated in their neighborhood school. So I don't know if that answered the question.
Okay. Thank you, Marty. Are there any other questions for Marty before we move on to our next presenter? Marty, the person who posed that question has responded and said, thank you, that is helpful. This has been a challenging issue in Missoula.
Well, thank you. It is a challenging issue, not just in Missoula, but in every other school district or many other school districts throughout the United States. It is a challenge, and there are court cases that fall on both, that go, how do I say it, that answer that same question in 2 different ways. But the spirit of the law is about full inclusion in neighborhood schools.
Any other questions for Marty? Okay, and we will have another question and answer period after all of the presenters. So if you think of something later on that you'd like to ask Marty, just jot it down, and when we have the next opportunity for questions and answers, you can ask it at that time. Thank you, Marty, for sharing the great information. We really appreciate you taking time out of your DC schedule to join us today. With that, I'd like to ask McLean to go ahead and unmute his microphone, and I will tell you a little bit about McLean by way of introduction. McLean Burnham is a 2002 graduate of Polson High School. He has been employed at the Northlake County Library since graduating. He also works a variety of part-time positions, including office management, pet sitting, laundry services, and public presentations dealing with disabilities. McLean has had several years of experience working as a literacy tutor at the elementary school and as a courtesy clerk at a local grocery store. He is a published author and volunteers in his community. McLean is an active member of the Rural Institute Consumer Advisory Council. In fact, McLean facilitates all of our council meetings, and he's also part of pretty much every work group that the council forms. He has served as a representative for the state of Montana regarding national advocacy, and McLean lives in his own apartment and enjoys his independence. He is an avid local sports fan and loves animals, music, and WWE wrestling. With that, take it away, McLean.
Can everybody hear?
Yes, you sound great, McLean. Thanks.
All right. When you're talking about my work, I also do some dog sitting for people whenever they need dog sitting too.
You're a busy guy.
Yeah. All right. And hello, everyone. I am McLean Burnham, a member of the Consumer Advisory Council for the Rural Institute. Inclusion is important and subject for us as a council. We value inclusion and try to think of creative ways for inclusion to happen. This past year, we have had the opportunity to be able to offer a grant through a community investment fund. We had never undertaken a project like this before, but we were up for the challenge. We formed what we refer to as a work group. This group itself was inclusive. We brainstormed ideas as to what we wanted to do with this grant money. We would offer it to what our criteria would be and so forth. Our top priority that everyone agreed on would be that whomever received these funds would need to have their project be inclusive. We formed our criteria and the guidelines. We were expecting our applicants to follow. Next, we discussed the application and how to advertise the grant. It was exciting to see people and organizations responding with a wide variety of ideas. They were all very interesting. There was a lot of discussion, and some were even contacted for more information. But in the end, it was the inclusion piece that helped us make our decision. The grant was rewarded to Summit Independent Living. They did a 10-week improvisation program that ended with a live comedy and a variety show for their community. Organizers recruited 32 people with and without a disability to their workshops. 17 of those people decided they were ready to take the plunge and get on stage to perform in front of over 100 people at the Bass Showcase on the ZUA Community Variety Show. Workshop attendees ranged in age from 7 to 58. Some had performed there before, but most were doing so for the first time. Of the 17 people that got up on the stage at the Crystal Theater, 10 had never been on stage before. I lived close enough that my family and I were able to attend this event. Having this experience has helped me appreciate the needs for grants. There are wonderful ideas floating around in someone's head that just need the financial help to make them become realities. Realities that wouldn't happen otherwise. This year, applications will be available starting March 1st. The deadline to apply is May 1st. The fund is small, so it's only for Montana projects. Inclusion helps me feel more comfortable and that they soon realize that a person with a disability isn't that much different than they are. Friendships can be formed that benefit everyone in their own unique way. I would like to mention something that is important to me personally. I love sports. I love my community. I love my high school sports teams. Believe it or not, they love me too. Why would I say this? I have been an unofficial water person for the basketball teams ever since I was in high school. I graduated in 2002, so that's a few years. But still today, I help out. Every year, I get to meet new people as the students change. I miss the ones that graduate. But here comes the best part. I have made wonderful friends. When there is a break at college or the old team members come back home for a visit, they look me up. I am in contact with others through phone calls. This year, I wasn't able to get to one of the out-of-town games, and a player said the team missed me and that I was a valuable part of the team. Inclusion feels great. And also sometimes, when I know the kids so well and they like me so much that sometimes my friends on the basketball team, the kids and the players will ask me for a hug, and they'll want hugs sometimes. So I give them hugs too sometimes because they want a hug. How can we make inclusion happen? First, start with yourself. Even just saying hi or smiling at people opens doors for inclusion. Don't be hesitant to invite someone to do something with you. It could be anything from just visiting on the phone to inviting them to come over to your place or your pad to hang out with you. If you don't feel comfortable, why would they feel comfortable? Be aware that a person that should be a person and be unable to talk doesn't mean they don't want to have a conversation. If you are in a situation where you or your organization may be planning an event or activity, consider whether a person with a disability, such as needing wheelchair access, has just that, and so then definitely not inclusion. Sorry about that background noise, guys. My mom's getting back on a trip, and our dog got excited, and so sorry about that. Oftentimes, transportation can be an issue that discourages inclusion. Be sure to offer a ride or arrange a ride for those who were unable to drive or can't afford to pay someone to drive for them. I am blessed to have a willing family that pretty much takes me wherever I want to go. And there have been a few times that didn't work out, but that's the case for everyone. If you have made arrangements to do something with someone and you can't make it, remember to be respectful of the other person and call to let them know as soon as possible, ahead of the time. They were probably counting on seeing you, and it is super disappointing when things get canceled at the last minute. I personally feel, and my mom has said to me, that basically everyone has some kind of disability. We are all in this together. It's nicer life to all be on the same team. Thank you for listening to the presentation.
Thank you very much, McLean, for the great information. If folks out there have any questions that they would like to ask McLean, please go ahead and type those into the chat box on your screen. Again, if you don't see the chat box, look up in the upper right-hand area of your screen, and there should be an arrow inside of a box. If you click on that, it should open up a menu, and you can see the chat screen on that menu. McLean, we did get a comment in from someone saying, "Thank you for mentioning transportation. All students should receive education about transportation options." That was a really important point that you brought up, because it's hard for people to be included if they can't get to the places where they need and want to be, right?
Correct.
Any other questions or comments for McLean? Okay, well, thank you very much, McLean, for the great information. And if you want to go ahead and mute your phone again, we'll go ahead and introduce our next presenter. Next, I would like to introduce Natalias Story. Natalia has served on the Rural Institute Consumer Advisory Council since 2010. She has participated in a variety of work groups and presented in various venues, most frequently at the annual Montana Youth in Transition Conference. Natalia graduated from Big Sky High School in Missoula in June 2013. She enjoys her 3 jobs, Bean and Boutique, the Writing Center, and Inc. Realty Group. She keeps up with selling her pot holders in local businesses, and she stays active through adult swimming and rec center classes such as ULA, ULA Power, Bar, and Pilates. In her spare time, I'm not sure that she has any, Natalia enjoys reading and the fiber arts. She likes the Narnia and Lord of the Rings series of books, and she enjoys spin-ins with her mom. Natalia is learning to knit the yarn that she has spun. And Natalia also has 2 guest presenters with her today, and I'll let her introduce her guests to you when she's ready. And with that, take it away, Natalia. Thank you very much for being with us today.
My name is Natalias Story. I graduated from high school soon 2013. I am active in my community at McLean Children's Better. I volunteer as an usher and the University Rec Center. I take classes such as ULA, Bar, and Pilates. I swim at the Grizzly Pool High School and grab swimming are done. As an adult, I enjoy adult ghost lap swim. Alan is my swim coach. Alan Bolan is head coach for Missouri High School this morning, and she coaches adult ghost lab at the gazebo. I text her in that morning. She picks me up in her car. We dance to all our music on the way to the pool.
Alan, can you back up, please? You can say this is Alan.
Yeah, this is
Hello. So we have always been really excited about including Natalia in our swim programs. At the high school, when she swam for Big Sky High School, we had very much a policy of inclusion, meaning that it didn't matter what the skills were that the swimmer brought to the pool. We used whatever they had, and we taught them what they needed to know in order to be successful. Now, Natalia came to us, and she had already been a club swimmer, so she had a lot of skills, and she fit right in with our team and our group, and she became a very valued member of the swim team. She swam with us for 4 years, and it was exciting because we got to take her on her first road trip out of town without, I think, one of her parents with us. And it was pretty exciting. She got to spend 2 nights away from her mom, and she got to spend it in a hotel room with our other her other swim team members, and they were thrilled to be with her. Many of them were like mother hens, and they took great care of Natalia, and Natalia was always right on time for her races. We never had to worry about where she was at because she was such a good swimmer and so good at keeping track of what she was doing. And then when Natalia graduated, it was great because Natalia lives in my neighborhood. So Natalia and I communicate each morning on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and she rides with me over to the Grizzly Pool, and she participates in a group called Adult Coached Hour. And this, again, is a group that includes everybody. Inclusion is big in our program because some people come to the pool and they don't know as much about swimming as Natalia does. And so Natalia actually teaches them how to be better swimmers. So it's really exciting to have her be a part of our program and to continue to swim as an adult. And I know that, you know, she is just one of perhaps between 24 and 36 people that come to our program on a weekly basis. So I'm always thrilled, and Natalia and I have decided that dancing ooh-la in the car is the way to go in the mornings. So, does anyone have any questions for me?
I'm not seeing any pop up yet, but if you're able to hang around for a bit, people may type in their questions and I can read them out as they come in.
Okay, I'll just hang around and let you keep going.
Awesome, thank you.
I work hard in the group, and by editing various for assets. Photo copy as needed. Is this tribute more to assets? We are asking. I work hard by writing September. I enter log and accepts data into the computer. Data. I have been working for since summer 2012. Carrie, as my boss. Carrie Webster is the director of the Reporting Center. At the University of Medina. I like to take photos at the parties. This is Kelly.
Hi everybody, I'm Kelly. One of the things, I'm looking at these photos here, and one of the funny things I think about the picture on the right, the one of Natalia and I are actually looking at some of the login slips that Natalia helps us enter into our database in the Writing Center. And we had a funny moment the other day because one of the value added pieces that Natalia has brought to the Writing Center is that she's helped to make us very aware where we are not consistent in how we record and write down our data. And when Marty was talking earlier about thinking about inclusion as beyond physical access, I think one of the things that we've learned in the Writing Center from Natalia is that inclusion for us has meant value added, and I think many of the ways that Natalia has added value to the Writing Center isn't just in the work that she does for us. So I can say with absolute honesty that our data is in better shape than it has ever been in the past. And so that photo on the right is Natalia was showing me where we consistently make mistakes when we're writing down our data for her to enter. So there's the work, kind of practical work value added, but there's also the value added of simply having Natalia's presence, not only in our working space in the Writing Center on campus, but also that picture on the left is a picture of Natalia at one of the many parties she's attended at my house for the Writing Center. Natalia is sort of our Writing Center photographer, so she takes photos and sends them to me, which I can send down around to the rest of the tutors. She always contributes to the conversations and the potlucks that we have in that space. And I guess when I think about inclusion, I think I was telling Natalia and her mother the other day that I actually feel like Natalia has included us more than we have included her. And one of the things that I so appreciate about having Natalia in our space in the Writing Center, our space is a really public space. It's a space where we have 5,000 sessions with students every year, and faculty walk into that space. And so Natalia's act of including us in her life, and then also us including her in our working space, is really visible to the rest of campus, and that's a piece that's been really kind of exciting for me. So we've all learned a lot from having Natalia in our space, like I said, both in our working space, but also having her part of our professional lives in the Writing Center. And I also would be happy to answer questions if people have questions later.
Great. Thank you very much, Natalia and Kelly and Helen, for the fantastic information you shared. If anybody has questions for Natalia, for Helen, for Kelly, or for Natalia's mom, Jan, please go ahead and type those into the chat box. We do have one that's come in. How did Natalia get connected with the university programs? She has employment, social, and self-enrichment activities all on campus. Is there a program families with teenagers graduating from high school should know about?
Should we answer that? There is no, at least to my, this is Kelly, at least to my knowledge, there isn't a formal program that places folks like Natalia into these kinds of working relationships. But I will say, I mean, just through informal networks, I had the opportunity to meet Janet, Natalia's mom, and Janet had asked if this might be a potential opportunity. It was something that the Writing Center had never attempted to do before. And so I think, I don't know, I mean, one thing I'm thinking about is in terms of formalizing the informal things that happen, I think Janet recognized that we were already the kind of space, it's probably the same with the swim team and the Grizzly Pool, working with Helen and Inc., that there's certain, I guess, qualities about the people and the spaces that make those spaces and people approachable, which maybe Janet recognized that. And so it makes me wonder if the university and other community places might be able to kind of formalize those informal networks that happen.
Jan, do you want to talk at all about how Natalia got connected with employment on the university campus?
I know assistant director and socially as an acquaintance, and I just asked the regular question, what's not getting done in the office? And she told me the login slips are piling up. So I went into that space, like as I said, and I looked at it, felt it, learned the job, tried to get a feel if it would be a good fit for Natalia. So there was a lot of background work going on before she ever entered that space. But we wanted to make sure that there are certain things that help Natalia be more successful, and those were all in place. Then I learned the job and wrote a task list and Gretchen trained me and double-checked the task list, and then Gretchen trained Natalia. Does that answer the question? Maybe Kelly can follow up.
I was just going to add a piece that was important for us, because we have different groups of tutors who come through the Writing Center and get to work with Natalia. One thing that we learned is that it's really important for Natalia to have the opportunity to introduce herself and tell her story, rather than me telling the tutors that they'll be working with Natalia, or Janet telling the tutors. And so Natalia participates in either our professional development meetings with the tutors, or with a tutor training where Natalia actually talks about herself, and the tutors have an opportunity to ask her questions, so that they see her as, you know, an independent and insightful individual who's in our space, who can speak for herself.
Great. Okay, and we've had a couple more questions come in. Let me grab them here. Oops. The first one, to what degree is Natalia making decisions about her job? And this is directed to you, Natalia, too. What does she do, and how does she, I'm sorry, let me start again. To what degree is Natalia making decisions about her job, what she does and how she does it? And what impact does that have on her ability to be included?
So I'll say, from the Writing Center's perspective, one way in which it's been sort of a reciprocal relationship is that we've actually, based on the feedback that Natalia gives us on the data entry, we've actually changed and revised our login slips. And so she's actually had, I mean, I guess that's a little different than decision making, but she actually has influence over the decisions that then we make going forward. So she gives us input that actually makes our work systems, I think, more successful. And then Natalia, you know, Natalia gets to set her own hours, but in response to the needs that the Writing Center has. And so we send out a schedule of what our semester workload will be, and then Natalia looks at that and decides when she would best be inserted into that process. I think Natalia probably has favorite tutors that she likes to overlap with sometimes in the Writing Center. So Natalia has some decision-making power over when she's in the space, but it's always in response to what our needs are. So it's sort of a reciprocal relationship.
Natalia, is access to the University of Montana Rec Center a perk of your employment, or do you purchase access or pay another way?
I want to say a check.
Okay, Natalia's writing her, oh, you write a check, okay. So you write a check to pay for your rec center dues?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you. Next question. What do families do to help their young adults be successful in inclusive settings, school, work, etc.? And this one, I'll go ahead and unmute all of the presenters, so if any of you want to answer that about what families do to help their young adults be successful in inclusive settings, feel free to jump in.
I guess this is...
Go ahead.
Go ahead, because this is Marty, and I was just going to say, since it's I'd like to hear from the families. I can't add anything to this.
Steve or Val,
Are you there
on the line?
Valerie?
Yeah, can you rephrase that question? I wasn't quite clear on it. And I don't have a screen saying what reading the
Sure.
question.
Definitely.
One more time, please.
What do families do to help their young adults be successful in inclusive settings, school, work, etc.?
I'd have to say that we're like always there, you know, to make sure that they succeed. You know, we're looking, you know, for McLean to succeed as much as we can. You know, there's always setbacks and, you know, disappointments here and there, but, you know, we do our best we can to be with them, to strengthen them by, you know, just standing right there, you know, to look over his shoulder and point in the right direction. And for the most part, McLean, I think, is pretty appreciative of that, you know, because the very first slide we showed of an exercise gym where we go to out in the corral, it's called a Redneck Gym, and we take him there every day to make sure we can help him maintain his weight and his strength so he has a healthy life to be able to participate in a whole lot of other projects.
And family's important because even though you have friends and friends and people you can talk to, your family know you the best and inside and out, and they'll always love you and care about you, and they'll care about you the most. So family is super important to have them to help you because they mean anything.
So
This is Janet.
go ahead, Jen. Go ahead.
The graduating from high school was a big deal, and then all the fun of high school is over. And so it's an opportunity to explore different ideas. So we went to the rec center a couple of times. I went with yoga to Natalia, and then one time we went to ULA class. And I just said, well, this is not for me. But Natalia loved it, and she chose ULA over yoga. So now she goes to ULA class, and I don't go at all. I have the teacher's email, and we stay in contact through email, so if there's any concerns, we can talk back and forth. And I visit ULA once a month just to see how things are going, and I just peek around the corner, but I don't go to the class. Another thing I do is I have a weekly email that I send out to everybody. And I just and Natalia participates. She writes what she did in the weekend. She tells what her schedule is for the week, and I tell a little bit of goals that we're working on and things, concerns or successes that we're having. It's just out to everyone who isn't part of Natalia's life to know what she's up to, and everyone appreciates them. So they just say, I appreciate it, I can talk to Natalia better, ask WH questions instead of yes/no questions. And that's been a really good source of exchange of information from the different sites, recreation, work, social, etc.
I'll add that Janet did a really wonderful job of putting together a little document, Janet and Natalia putting together a document to help educate our tutors on how to communicate effectively with Natalia. And so there's been, I mean, we see Natalia and Janet as both in kind of an educator role for us in the Writing Center. And just for me, I was looking at Natalia's slides in 2012, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, it's been that long she's been in the Writing Center. It's been really lovely for me to be able to watch Janet, I hope you don't mind me saying Janet, Janet making decisions along the way of when to let Natalia go a little bit and be independent. And so, like Janet was saying in the beginning, she was very present in the Writing Center and making those decisions along the way of when to stop having to be there or when to stop having to look in the window. And I would imagine as a parent myself that those would be hard decisions to make. So it's been nice to be educated both by Janet and Natalia and to be kind of respectful of the family's process in letting Natalia become more independent in our space.
And that really fits with what Marty said during his part of the presentation when he talked about it being a process, that it doesn't happen overnight, that it takes time. And that ties in with a question that is directed to Natalia and McLean. Natalia and McLean, what do you want other people to do to support your inclusion? What do you want your families, providers in the community, partners in the community to do to support your inclusion?
Just to be our friend and to help with whatever they can. It's good to have support and people who care.
Maybe patients too.
And people with patience too, and that and that will take more time to listen and deal with people with disabilities, because it is harder, a little harder to help people with disabilities, as people who don't have them or aren't necessary in the law or the government all have a disability. Usually it's easier to understand them because they have more there. Not saying that we're bad or anything. I'm not sure how else to explain it though.
Good job.
So patience is really important, it sounds like, right, McLean?
Invite me out for fun.
Could you repeat that again, Natalia, please?
Invite me.
Invite you?
Fun.
Could you maybe type it into your chat box? Invite me out for fun. Thank you, Natalia. Are there other questions for any of our presenters today? While we're giving you a chance to type in any other questions you might have, we had a few resources to share with you. There are a couple of great articles on Kathy Snow's website. The first, mainstreaming, integration, inclusion, is there a difference? And the second, what is inclusion and what's not? Some really wonderful information in there. So if you have a chance, you can go to the Disability is Natural website, to their library, and check out both of those articles. There's also a YouTube video called Inclusion is Belonging that you might be interested in, the Inclusion Network website, and the Kids Together Inc. website, both of which have a number of different resources related to inclusion. Any other questions from any of the audience members? Okay, well, let's before I make a couple of closing remarks here and invite the presenters to make any closing remarks, let's take a look at those questions that we had back in the beginning of the webinar. The first question, when we're taking a look at, are these inclusive or are these not? So you should see the question up on your board. Students with disabilities attend the neighborhood school but stay in a separate classroom all day. Inclusive or not? Okay, and it looks like on that one we have 100% saying no, that is not inclusive when somebody stays in a classroom on their own in a separate classroom all day. Okay, the next poll. A service club in your local area includes members who have people who have disabilities participating alongside people without disabilities. Inclusive or not?
Oops.
Whoops. That one shut all by itself. Sorry about that. So that came out 100% saying yes, that is inclusive. Okay, next one. A basketball team for youth with disabilities. Inclusive, not inclusive? We have a resounding no on that one. The basketball team for youth with disabilities, not inclusive. 100% said no, that is not inclusive. How about a basketball team for all middle school students? Is that inclusive, yes or no? Okay, and that one we have 100% saying yes, that is inclusive because all middle school students can participate. Okay, the next poll. We have a play at a community theater and the actors and actresses are people with and without disabilities. Inclusive, yes or no? And that one's unanimous too. We have 100% saying yes, that is inclusive. Okay, one more. This is a dance for teens with disabilities at the local teen center, at the local youth center. Inclusive, yes or no? Okay, and once again, it's unanimous saying no, that is not inclusive because it's just for teens with disabilities. All right. So it looks like we were 100% in agreement in all of the polls, which I hope means that we're coming away from today's webinar with a better, richer, deeper understanding of what inclusion means and why it's important and how we can make it happen. Do any of our presenters have any last-minute comments that you would like to make to the group?
This is Marty. I don't know if you can hear me or not, if I'm muted or not, but if I'm not, I just appreciate everyone's time being here today and I appreciate the discussion. I think we've come a long way in 50 years and we have a long way to go, but I think we're well on our way. I think we have a bright future ahead for all of us. Thank you for being here.
Just a couple of housekeeping things. A reminder that a short survey will appear on your screen as soon as the webinar ends. Please do take the time to complete that. Our next webinar is called My Voice, My Choice, My Future, And our presenters for that webinar will be talking about self-determination, self-advocacy, voting, supported decision-making, and topics in that whole self-determination realm. That will take place on March 22nd from 1 until 2:30 Mountain Time. And the flyer for that will likely be going out toward the end of this week, so be watching for that. The recording for today's webinar will be posted to our Transition and Employment Projects website. It usually takes about a week or two to get it up there, but if you would like to have other people listen to the webinar, or if you would like to re-listen to it, check out our website in a couple of weeks. And I would really like to thank all of our presenters today, Helen, Kelly, Jan, Natalia, McLean, Steve for being there to do the technical assistance for us, Marty for coming to us all the way from Washington, D.C. I appreciate all of your expertise and your experience that you've shared today. And thank you to all of our audience members for taking the time out of your busy day to join us for this webinar. We hope that you have a wonderful afternoon. Take care, everyone.